this ongoing conversation around data collection for the RJ grant program. We're going to go ahead and record this meeting for any of the grantees that are not able to attend today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Imani Brown, and I'm the grant coordinator for the RJ grant here at the CJC. I'm excited to be here today. I hope that this webinar will be helpful to you as you get started on inputting your data for the RJ data reporting pilot. In just a moment, I'm going to pass this over to Rima, but I did want to quickly say that as we go over this new process, I don't want anyone to be stressed or anxious. We are aware that this is new, and I want to reassure you all that if you have any additional questions after we leave here today, you can always send me an email or give me a call. I am happy to work through those questions with you, as I know that Avery and Rima are as well. And with that, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Rima, and she'll walk us through our agenda for this meeting and get us started on what you can expect with the data collection process.
Hello, everyone. It's great to see all your familiar names and a few faces here and there. So here is our agenda for the webinar today. First, we're going to talk about our goals for the new data reporting and the wealth of new information we're hoping to get about the good work you all are doing in your RJ programs. Then we're going to look at where you can access the report in SM Apply, as well as some key things to pay attention to while you're entering your data. Next, we'll look at the questions you'll be required to answer this quarter during the pilot phase, and the list of questions that will be optional this quarter, but required in subsequent quarters when the new reporting is fully implemented. Then we'll look at some counting rules and key definitions. Please keep in mind that more information on how to answer questions, including definitions, what should be counted, such as whether the question is looking for like a number of individuals or a number of meetings or cases, etc. All that can be found in those reference documents Avery sent out with the quarterly reporting email. There are also a lot of subtle differences between what we were asking in each question. So we'll go through some highlights today, but we would also recommend you have those reference materials open and available when you're completing the reporting. Then we'll look at the required measures and next steps. And then finally, we also set aside some time at the end of the presentation to address any questions you have. So throughout the presentation, if you have a question that comes up, we encourage you to post that question in the chat. We'll keep track of those questions and answer each one during that time set aside for Q&A at the end of the presentation. As Imani said, you're always welcome to reach out to us directly with questions after this webinar or at any time. And the slides will be provided along with other resource docs and the webinar recording to all of you, to help you as you transition with this new data reporting as well. So the goal of the new RJ data collection process is to build a standardized, de-identified data reporting framework that allows the RJ program to demonstrate program reach. So that's all those questions about who is being served, data on demographics, each person's role, like harm party, responsible party, support person, etc., what jurisdictions and Oregon programs are serving, and other details like that. So that's program reach. And then program processes is another part of this framework we're looking at. And that is what is happening, what services are being provided as a result of this grant program, and how much service the average participant receives. The third part of this framework is participant outcomes. So for those questions, we're really looking at what changes are being achieved at the participant level. And for this, we are trying to capture a much more comprehensive picture of impact that includes, what participants are achieving in their lives, as well as any criminal justice system outcomes that person also achieves. So we're really trying to look beyond our previous reporting measure of recidivism, and trying to capture like all of the things that the participation in an RJ program can impact in someone's life. The fourth framework that we're looking at is system impact, and that's really what changes are being achieved at the system level. And the measures related to that are really speak to the goals of the grant program as a whole, as outlined in the rules. So that's things like how many people are diverted from the criminal justice system. So that's sort of the overarching framework that we're looking at across the board with all of this new reporting. Thank you, Amani. So let's look at where to access this report in SM Apply now. Everyone should be familiar with reporting in SM Apply at this point. The new RJ data reporting form can be found on your task list as shown in this image. It's the second task down on the list. Last quarter, Avery included included the SM Apply 2527 FAQ documents with your quarterly reporting email. That document includes some basics on how to navigate SM Apply, add collaborators who can edit the reports, and some other basic SM Apply functions. So if you run into any questions about SM Apply itself, we would recommend you looking through that FAQ just to help you work through those SM Apply specific things. So RJ data reporting is a mandatory task on your task list that has to be completed to be considered compliant with quarterly reporting as outlined in your contract. It is also a required task in SM Apply, which means you will not be able to submit your quarterly report until you complete it. As you can see by the fact that the review and submit buttons on the top left side of this image are grayed out, so you cannot hit them and hit submit. And also all the circles next to the individual tasks are grayed out at this point because none of the tasks in the example have been completed yet. So you need to complete all those. The submit button will turn green, and then you can submit your report. Reporting is due by the 25th or July 25th, and programs will need to make arrangements to ensure reporting is submitted on time by the owner of the SM Apply account. So I just want to repeat that since we have run into issues with programs not being able to submit quarterly reports previously. The report needs to be submitted by the account owner. So if you have completed all the reporting and you don't see the submit button, you're probably not the account owner, and whoever else is the account owner at your agency will need to log in and hit submit. Otherwise, it does not count as being submitted. Please also make sure that staff are available for any questions we might have about your reporting in the following weeks. Especially during this pilot period, we're going to be reviewing all the data submitted, and we'll follow up individually with programs if we have questions or corrections that need to be made. So we have had some issues getting timely and complete responses to those questions. And those delays do end up impacting everyone. So we just really encourage you to be prepared for questions and edit, especially this first quarter, and have staff available so we can work through those issues together. We can move to the next one. Thank you. So there are 4 pages of data reporting. At the end of the 4 pages, there'll be a button like the one shown at the top of the slide where you will need to hit the Mark Task as Complete button to complete the task. Once marked as complete, both check marks will turn green as shown in the second screenshot at the bottom of the slide. You'll also be given a summary of the questions and answers you inputted so you can review everything that you inputted. Don't forget to complete your other required tasks like the expenditure report and an adjustment request if you're asking for one this quarter, and then hit that submit button once everything is complete and all those green check marks are showing up. So now let's get into the questions themselves. As a reminder, the first data reporting period is the pilot period. Oops, did we miss a slide? About the SM Apply errors? Sorry about that. So we did want to, before we move on to from SM Apply, we did want to draw attention to a couple of errors you may encounter while completing your reporting in SM Apply. So like I said, there's 4 pages of data questions that need to be completed. The left graphic shows what an optional question would look like. As you can see, it says the word optional after the question in the title. If the question has optional after the question title, you do not have to complete the question this quarter during the pilot phase, although you're welcome to do so if you have that information available. We will look more at which questions are required and which ones are optional. In that slide, you got a preview of. If you leave the optional questions blank, you won't get an error message. However, if you leave a required question blank, you will get an error message and you won't be able to proceed to the next page of the report. The graphic on the right of the slide shows the error messages that will appear if you tried to move forward without entering data into the fields for one of those required questions. You'll get an error message for each of the fields left blank. If you are entering data into those required questions, and that's data that you're not yet collecting, you'll need to input a 0 into that field to be able to move forward. As you can also kind of see in both of these examples, the questions include some data validation built in, so everyone is inputting data the same way. So most questions require whole positive numbers, and you'll also get an error message if you enter anything besides a whole positive number. However, there are a couple exceptions to this rule, like a few of the, I think, optional questions at the end about pre-post surveys allow decimal points. So again, please read each question, pay attention to the individual error messages you get, and address them appropriately. Now I think we can move forward. All right, so like I said, the first data reporting period is a pilot. The required questions give us kind of a snapshot of your efforts, and that data is going back to July 2025 if you have services to report back that far, and then to June 30th of this year. The data reported will be used, in CJC conversations regarding continuous funding, so it's really important that we get that information as completely entered as possible. If you have data available for the optional questions, it's strongly encouraged that you report it as well, even though they're not being required this quarter. We understand this is all new, and there's a chance that the optional questions represent things that you have not collected so far. They might be completely new questions that your data collection process hasn't addressed yet. So what we're doing is making those questions optional for this reporting period. However, this quarter, this pilot period is really intended to be a building up for everyone. So we all get to the point where we can completely fill out this report. So everyone has a chance this quarter basically to review all of these questions and review what systems you have in place to collect that data, if there's any additional client forms that need to be made, looking at all of that stuff to make sure that you can actually collect all of the data for both the pilot and full implementation list of questions by October 1st, 2026. So when that report opens October 1st, 2026, we'll expect you to have data on all of the questions. There will all be required. You should have a data collection system in place then. So this is really meant to be a technical assistance period where we can help you work through any issues you think you might have, or if you have questions about how data should be collected, we're happy to help you through that this quarter. You can also provide feedback to CJC on questions. So we've already gotten a little bit of feedback from folks when we're going out and doing site visits. If you have specific feedback on a question, please feel free to send it to us as well. So here is the list of required questions. It includes 14 data measures, and like I said, all 14 must be complete to submit the quarterly reporting this quarter. If you're not currently collecting or have no way of counting a specific measure, enter 0. And just a note here, jurisdiction served, I think what we're looking for is a county name in that question. So just keep that in mind when you're filling out that one, that what we're really looking for is a county, so we can see what counties are being served by these programs. The questions in the required question list are really to look at specific data, like I said, for CJC to tell a more detailed story about the work being done by RJ programs. And these are the questions we thought you're most likely to already be collecting information on. Some of that story is, you know, the demographics of the folks being served by the program, both the responsible parties and the harm parties, if you have that available. And that information in particular enables us to be able to perform, equity analysis to track the referral and demand, referral volume over time, to assist with measuring the diversion impact and the legal system burden reduction. So all of those really like primary goals of the grant program itself. That's why they're being required this quarter. It's the real meat of what we're looking for. And then also what we think you probably are collecting already. So next we're going to look at the optional questions. So this is a little bit more detail related to the harmed parties, on the types of harm folks are coming to your program after having been involved in, some of the referral information, some of that other information that you might have to build or change your data collection processes to make sure that you're including. And again, all of this is really to going back to that framework we talked about earlier, so we get that complete picture of what this program is doing, and we're able to show all of the impacts of the restorative justice program in a way that we haven't been able to previously. Again, these questions are optional this quarter, will be required next quarter. We won't go into detail as much on these questions since we're focusing on the required questions, but please, if you have questions while reading through the documents on these, let us know. We'll help you work through them. Please make sure you're reviewing your data systems this quarter, like I said, to make sure you're able to collect this data moving forward. And again, we just really encourage you to reach out, email us if you're confused about anything, if you need any kind of technical assistance. We're here to help. So that's my part of the presentation. So now I'm going to pass to Amani so she can get into some more of those details. So Amani, the stage is yours.
I have so many screens, it was hard to find the mic button. Thank you, Rima. Also, thank you to everyone for sticking with us. I know this is a lot of information, so we appreciate you all being here today. So next, we're going to speak about what we call our 4 core counting rules. These 4 rules are something that we want grantees to keep in mind while completing your reporting. The first rule is that we want you to only report activities that occurred during the reporting period. For this pilot, the activities you would be reporting should have occurred between July 1st of 2025 and June 30th of 2026. So for example, if a referral was made in January of 2025, it would not be counted in this pilot because that referral occurred before the reporting period, even if you're still working with that participant today. There are instances where you're going to, you may report like closures or payments for referrals that you may have received outside of the reporting period, but the actual activity of the closure or the payment should have occurred during the reporting period for it to be counted. And then you're going to hear this throughout. Beginning with the October reporting period, you are only going to report activities that occurred during that reporting period. So there's going to be no backdating after this pilot period. The second rule is going to be to avoid duplicate reporting. So once an activity has been reported, it should not be reported again in a future reporting period. So for example, if you report a referral that took place during this pilot period, you would not report that same referral again in October. That's going to help to ensure that the data that we're collecting is accurately reflecting the number of unique activities that are happening. Rule number 3 is going to be to follow the question instructions. Each reporting question includes specific instructions about what should be counted. So you want to read those instructions carefully to ensure that everyone is reporting the same type of information. So for example, we have received a couple questions about question 22, and that is the one that's requesting account for meetings where both the harm party and the responsible party participated. For that measure, I understand that there are times when you can't have both parties and there is still restorative work that's being done. But for that specific question, we are asking that only meetings where both parties participated are being counted. Again, we know there's other restorative work that may still be occurring, but that information is not going to be forgotten. It's just going to be captured through other questions or other measures. So for instance, in the RJ model section, we've defined dialogues as to allow for only one party to be present. So in that spot where you may not be able to count it as that specific type of meeting, you are still counting that work in the dialogue section. So our final rule number 4, is going to be to use the definitions that are provided in the data glossary. Many restorative justice terms can be used differently across the various programs that we fund. So the glossary is going to provide a shared set of definitions for reporting purposes. When you all use these definitions consistently, then that's going to help us to ensure that the data that we're collecting is comparable across programs and that it accurately reflects the work that is happening. Again, if you come across a question that you're unsure about, definitely please reach out. We're happy to answer questions or talk through specific scenarios that may come up that you're thinking of, but our goal is ultimately to make reporting as clear and consistent as possible moving forward. Okay, so another 2 questions that we've gotten some questions on are these 2 terms revolving around participant involvement and unique participants served. So at first glance, these questions do seem very similar. So we just want to take a moment to explain the difference. Let's go ahead and use the example that we have on the slide. It says 1 participant is the responsible party in 3 separate cases during the reporting period. So for participant involvement, that individual would be counted 3 times. That means they're counted once for each case that they participated in. This measure is going to help us to understand the overall level of participant involvement and program activity that's happening. And then on the other side, for unique participants served, that same individual would only be counted once. And that's going to be regardless of how many cases they participated in during the reporting period. So that unique participant served is going to tell us how many individual people your program has served. Both measures are important because they answer different questions. So one's going to tell us how much participant involvement's occurring by case, and it does account for that extra work that's performed for those 2 additional cases with that same participant. And the other one's going to tell us how many unique individuals were reached at the individual level, and that's going to allow us to do analysis when we're comparing the other questions with completions and payments and things like that. Okay. So next, we're going to walk through the restorative justice model definitions that will be used for reporting purposes. Rather than reading each definition word for word, I wanted to highlight the key characteristics that are going to distinguish these models from one another. So many restorative processes, as we all know, share similar values and goals. So what we are really trying to do is just identify maybe the primary structure of the process that you're reporting. So on this slide, for example, for conference, we've defined it by who's in the room. So if the people directly or indirectly affected by the specific harm are coming together to address that harm and develop a repair plan, you can report it as a conference. For reporting purposes, if your process does not bring those parties together, then in this instance, another model may be a better fit. Another definition is for dialogue. This one's a little different because the defining feature isn't necessarily that everyone is present. The focus is more so on facilitated discussion around the impacts, the needs, accountability, and possible repair. So depending on the case circumstances, we all know it may include the harm party, the responsible party, or both. So if your process is designed more around exploration and conversation rather than bringing affected parties together, then dialogue may be the best fit to describe the process. And then for the next one, mediation is one of the easier ones to distinguish because it does require a neutral mediator that's working with both sides to help them reach an agreement. If there isn't a mediator and participants from both sides of a harm aren't included, then you would not define your process as mediation for reporting purposes. So you may notice we're really just asking ourselves a few questions to define each model. We're asking who's participating, what's the structure of the process, what's the primary purpose of the meeting, and typically as you're going through and thinking of different scenarios and reporting on them, if you answer those three questions, it's usually going to point you toward the right reporting category. Okay, in the same kind of subject, on this next slide, we have a panel and a restorative circle. So a panel stands apart because of who's participating. From my understanding, we don't yet have a grantee that uses this structure, but we wanted to be sure to include the possibilities that we did find during our research. So with the panel, instead of the harm party from a specific incident, it's going to involve a harm party's representative or a community member speaking with the responsible party. And that's typically going to be in a public face-to-face setting. So as I said, this model may be our least used model at the time, but just always remember to choose the model that best represents your process. And then lastly, we do have, for reporting purposes, restorative circles. They're going to be identified by how the conversation is structured and who is involved. So the defining features are that all parties are coming together. It's a facilitated circle process, and participants speak one at a time with a talking piece. If your process does not include those parts, then it may be better fit in another model. Before we move on, I do want to just emphasize that these definitions are reporting categories. They're not practice standards. You may have noticed that my language used throughout these last two slides, I made sure to include for reporting purposes. They aren't intended to define whether a process is restorative justice or tell programs how they should do their work. Our goal was to simply group similar types of processes together so that we're counting them consistently across programs. That consistency is going to allow us to better understand what restorative justice does look like across Oregon and to be able to communicate that story more accurately. Also, this is also an area where we would really appreciate your feedback. If you come across examples where a process doesn't seem to fit any of these categories, or you think a definition could be clearer, definitely let us know. Examples are especially helpful because it helps us to understand where those revisions or additional clarification may be necessary. And you may have also seen that throughout the questions, we do include other as a category. If you utilize that, just please be sure to define how the model is different than the ones that we provided so that we can review that and use that as we kind of try to perfect this process. Okay, almost done, everyone. 2 more slides, and then we can open the floor for questions. Next, we are going to briefly talk about the pre-adjudication phases. So these phases are used to identify where in the justice process a participant is entering restorative justice. So this information helps us to better understand how RJ is being utilized across Oregon and at what point programs are engaging participants. There are 3 pre-adjudication phases. The definitions can be found both in the question as you work through them in SM-Apply, and then also we define them in the data glossary. So those are both 2 resources if you're not sure which one to categorize something as. So rather than thinking of these as legal terms, we want you to think of them as checkpoints along the justice process. So phase 1 is going to be after a harm has been referred, but before law enforcement contact has been made with any of the participants. So if law enforcement has contacted the responsible party or the harm party or an affected community member, that is going to move on from phase 1. Phase 2 is going to be after law enforcement contact has been made with at least one of the participants, but before any formal charge or citation has been issued. And then phase 3 is going to be both after law enforcement contact has been made, formal charges have been filed, but before adjudication has occurred. So you want to make sure you're identifying which point best describes where the case was when your program became involved. Okay, the final term that we're going to cover today is external referrals. We have got some questions on this one as well. This is just another measure that's going to help us to understand how RJ programs are connecting participants with additional supports in the communities. So when we talk about external referrals, we're referring to a situation where your program directs or connects a participant to another organization or agency for services or resources outside of your program. So that could be a referral for housing assistance, behavioral health services, substance use treatment, legal assistance, employment resources, or really any other support that is going to help address those participant needs. The key distinction is that the referral is outside of your program. If you're simply connecting a participant with another staff member or another service that your organization provides, that would not be considered an external referral for reporting purposes. So this measure is going to help us to understand how RJ programs serve as a bridge to other community resources. And collecting this information is going to help us to better understand not only the RJ services being provided, but also how programs are helping participants access that broader network of community supports. Okay, as we wrap up, I do want to leave you with just a few next steps and support that you have available to you. We're asking that you submit your pilot data for activities completed between July 25 to June 26. And then while some fields are marked as optional for the pilot, we do strongly encourage you to complete as much information as you can. The more complete the data we receive, the more valuable this pilot's going to be in helping us to refine the reporting process. After today's webinar, we're going to email out the presentation slides, as well as the data glossary and the frequently asked questions document that we sent previously, just so you have that readily available. This recording will also be uploaded to the CJC YouTube page sometime this week. So if you want to go and rewatch what we presented today, that will be there as a resource as well. And then if any, we encourage you to just keep those resources handy, but as you work through your submission, but if any questions do come up along the way, as we've repeated, we're happy to help. Definitely reach out. Don't struggle by yourself. That's what we're here for. Office hours and one-on-one meetings are available to answer questions. As I said, discuss specific scenarios. We do encourage you to use this pilot really as an opportunity to evaluate your data collection processes. Going to say it one more time. All questions will begin to be required in October reporting period. So this is really just a chance to identify any gaps, make adjustments, and prepare your systems for that full implementation. We do really appreciate your partnership throughout this process. Your feedback and your participation during the creation of these questions, as well as during the pilot, will help us to really build a reporting system that's both meaningful and practical. So we do appreciate your help with this. Okay, so at this time, I want to go ahead and I will stop sharing my screen so that I can see everyone. And then I do invite you all to just raise your hand and we'll call on you and just kind of have a discussion with any questions that you have. Okay, took me a second. It looks like Colleen has her hand raised.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
I just had a few questions. If I'm understanding correctly, in October, we're reporting on July, August, September, and all of the new things will be required then. So like technically, if I had a case come in yesterday and I didn't collect this data, I'm out of compliance for October. Am I
I'm sorry,
understanding correctly?
can you repeat for me one more time?
So
So
everything is required for our October report, which covers July, August, September.
mhm.
So if I had a case come in yesterday and I didn't collect the data, I'm out of compliance. Like I feel like it's just like I'm gonna do my
No.
best to get everything ready, but this is the period of trying to get it. Do you see what I'm saying?
So June 30th is the last date that you're reporting right now, if I'm understanding your question
No, I
correctly.
understand that, but in October, I'm gonna have a report due for July, August, September,
Mm-hmm.
right?
July
And everything
1st.
is required at that
Mm-hmm.
point. However, today is July 7th,
So
right?
you can enter zeros into those fields that you aren't able to get into place, and we'll continue doing the data review and follow up with you. So we definitely are not expecting you to have like answers to every question. This is a transition phase. So next quarter, when you're entering the data back to July 1st, so a week ago,
Mm-hmm.
if you don't have that measure in place right away, put a zero there. We'll follow up to see what's going on just to make sure you did that progress towards being able to collect the data. And that will be sufficient.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
really
because
the
this,
biggest change is going to be the fact that you won't be able to move forward on those optional questions without putting some type of number in there,
yeah,
whether that's a zero or you're reporting.
yeah, just because it's going to take us a minute to get everything up to speed. So we'll
Yeah.
do our best to get everything ready by October, but we just had this presentation today. So,
No, no
okay.
need
Yeah,
to
and
panic. We
that's
understand.
Okay.
yeah,
Yes.
we
Thanks.
completely understand. Our hope is that some of this information, we would hope that you're collecting where your referrals are coming from, that we're
Right.
hoping that this isn't stuff that you wouldn't want to know the information for. But we're going to be lenient throughout the process, but we do just need to have time frames that are mapped out as to when it's going to start being required so we can find those issues sooner and start working through them instead of waiting to require it in like January and then there's all these issues that we never knew about.
Right. And I just, and we can maybe talk about this more tomorrow when we meet, but I just want to say for the record, I have some real concerns with the definitions. For example, we have a circle model, and I have a case right now where the harmed party had 14 individual circles with a community member, staff, and it was a circle process. And the harmed party had 4 individual circles and then they came together for 3 joint circles. But under your definition, those 3 joint circles are the only things that count as a circle. Everything else, I guess, would be a dialogue, which just doesn't seem accurate to what we're actually doing. So I just wanted to state that for the record. I have some concerns about that.
Yeah, that would be one of those ones that would be really helpful for you to either at our site visit bring up and we can take notes on that, or just send us an email. There's definitely going to be nuance. We're gonna work through them. It's a work in progress, but we had to start with some foundation and get some definitions, because what we're finding is that, especially as we do these site visits, for instance, conference and circle and dialogue are being used interchangeably, and we can't report on that data if that's the case. So
Right, I get it. Yeah, thank you.
Darren.
Hi there.
Hi.
I had a question about the duplicate reporting. So I'm thinking about cases that are sort of pending that span multiple reporting periods. And it's if I understood correctly when you were presenting on that, you all are going to be distinguishing, like, so if we have one respondent say that where the process is spanning the change between quarters, we're going to distinguish that participants participation in our program based on like the activity that's happening. So whether it's like maybe in the first quarter there would be a referral and an intake, and then in the second quarter it would be the dialogue process or things like. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, that is correct. Otherwise, some of that work would get lost, and there's a variance of how long the cases are going from our understanding. So yes, if you get the referral in one reporting period, and then you have a dialogue in the next one, and then you have a circle in the next one, you're still able to report that activity, but you're not going to report that dialogue and that referral and that conference and that in each reporting period.
Okay, but I'm assuming there will be also options or the ability to say, like to Colleen's point just a minute ago, we might have multiple circles, for example, or multiple dialogues across those different reporting periods. And so we'd be able to distinguish that within the way that the report's set up.
Yes, and then also in those directions to the question of the RJ model, it specifically says that you're counting the RJ process per meeting. So even if you had 3 separate processes with the same case during one reporting period, that work is not being lost. You're still able to count each of those processes, regardless of whether it's in the same reporting period or you're reporting it in a different one.
Okay, I think I follow that, and I think I'll probably just have to dig into it to understand it better, but great. That was my main question, to make sure I heard that correctly. Thank you.
Yes. Colleen. You're muted.
Sorry, we have
I do
cases
that all the time.
we have cases that go on for months. So if the same thing is happening in one quarter to the next, like they're doing circles, they're doing, I guess, dialogues, how do we report that?
You would just report the ones that occurred that quarter. So what we were
Oh.
trying to do is like make sure you're not recounting the same client enrolling through multiple quarters or that demographics through multiple quarters, but the activity questions, the questions about how many meetings you have, you're going to report the ones that occurred that quarter.
Okay.
So that case will be reported across multiple quarters, but hopefully the individual like demographics only in that first quarter you meet them, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
And then there's also a question trying to get at that information that's going to ask for the average time of how many days cases from referral to case closure during that reporting period happened. So that's also going to speak towards the, like you saying that sometimes the cases are lasting for a little bit longer. I think it would be a really good idea to print out. We gave the questions in a PDF format. I think it's really helpful to print that out and to look at the questions and really look at them together instead of in the SM apply, because a lot of the time, like that question, we've gotten a ton of questions on the where two people are a part of it. It's higher up, and then they don't recognize that you also get to report like dialogues and conferences and everything at the bottom. So then it feels like we're saying only that is important, but that's not the case. It's just we are asking different questions to get at different information. So it might be a little less stressful to print it out and just look at all of those questions as a whole before you get into SM Apply and start answering them. Do we have any other questions? Feedback also. Colleen was very brave and helpful to us in providing her feedback. I can take it, and it actually helps me, because if I don't know the feedback, I'm gonna keep thinking everything that I'm doing is A1. So don't be shy to hop off mute and tell me how it is. Okay. Well, if we don't have any other questions, I'm going to assume that's because you guys haven't gotten a chance to look at all the questions yet. And I know that you're also doing other reporting. So I know we said it many of times, and it wasn't just to hear ourselves talk. If you guys run into something's confusing, you have feedback, send us an email. We actually already got 2 emails from grantees that weren't going to be here today. Actually, that reminds me. I think it would be helpful I'm going to pull up those questions that I answered just to see if there was any that I didn't touch on, so you guys can get the answers that I provided to them. Let's see. Okay, one question we got was, how would CJC like us to handle harmed parties that are businesses? If it is a big box store versus small mom and pop business that is the victim and or the store manager. Our response is that CJC is not requesting harmed parties to be categorized at this time. For questions requesting harmed party counts, you may report all categories as one. If this changes in the future, we'll be sure to clarify those instructions. Let's see. We did also receive a question asking for some guidance on how to ask for transgender status if you're not already collecting it. We just provided an answer that we understand that this conversation is a sensitive topic. The programs that we have spoken to are collecting it through a form, either through a hard copy provided or during intake, or maybe a digital like Microsoft survey before their initial intake appointment. We have received guidance from our research that best practice is to separate transgender status from gender choice to avoid making a participant choose between being male or female or other and transgender. And it is best that they are advised that this is voluntary to provide that information, and that CJC is only using demographic information that is self-reported to do equity analysis. And also, if anyone has to go and you don't want to hear the answers to these questions, I won't be offended. I just want to make sure we get this out here. Third was, we went over the participant involvement and unique participants. And then let's see. Okay, the last one was a good question. I answered the other stuff in the slides. They were asking what we're asking for when we request the average score in the participant surveys. We're asking for the satisfaction score. That definitely was good feedback, and we can make that more clear as we move forward. The trouble was when we got feedback that's saying, what is your pre-program satisfaction for a harm party? Didn't feel right. So we made it a little broader. And also there's work to be done considering all programs are using different pre and post surveys. So at this time, we're looking for satisfaction ratings pre and post program. If you have one question or section that addresses that, then you would take the scores from that area, average those responses, and report that number to the CJC. With those answers, are there any other questions before we hop off? All right, well, as I said, we will send these slides and those resource documents, and always feel free to reach out. Have a good day.